All right. Hey traders, TG here. Let's see, it's Tuesday. So we had a nice 3-day weekend. Hopefully you guys are feeling a little bit refreshed. The market's feeling a little bit tired, but it did have a pretty good bounce today. I think it's just seems a little oversold for the moment, and that's why we kind of got that bounce. So let's kind of dive through this for a little bit. Thank you, Mirza. Looks like we're good to go. Terry, good to see you. Brightest side, I know you're out there chatting away already. So yeah, let's dive in. Yeah, people out there in the social medias, YouTube, Facebook, X, LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff. You obviously are watching me, but if you want more information, simplertrading.com/Moxie. And let's kind of dive into it. So we're at some very key levels, and then I'll even show you guys some seasonality. I'm sure a lot of us know that February, especially the second part of February, is seasonally weak. So take a look at this. And that just kind of shows you that we are in the spot where there's definitely some seasonal weakness coming in. And so we just need to kind of be okay about that, understanding that. And then also to just realize in a market like this, obviously the SPX has been very range bound. We have been seeing a lot of down moves, but some areas of the market might be getting a little bit oversold. And that's where we need to figure out if they are going to bounce or if they're just going to bear flag, what kind of impact that's going to have on the market. And we've been seeing the VIX and volatility move up. So this is challenging time in the market, but we seem to be doing all right, navigating a few things. We just took off what our Google trade. I think was 105% gain on that one, so that's good. And then I think what else did we do today? I think this is about it. And then our SMH play is probably just a little bit positive right now. Yeah, exactly. Short the pops, and then just realize when the market is getting a little bit stretched to the downside. Because again, in a down market, you get a lot of short squeezes, and so the up moves can be pretty strong, even if they're shortly lived. They can still be pretty strong. And then let me see. I still need to get my drawing tool up here. And that's the thing that for today, the market will continue to be weak this morning, but we got a little bit of a bounce. But yeah, if you look at the market, it was just getting a little bit stretched and coming into support. I mean, look here. I mean, we've essentially got a level that we still need to break through at some point. But was it going to do it today? Probably not. You can see this morning we're getting a little bit, short in the tooth, I guess, if that's how we want to rephrase it. We had just carried over from the weakness from Friday. Some investors and traders probably a little bit nervous over the weekend, so we just continue to get some more weakness down here. But this market's just not exactly trending to the downside yet, so that's why you need to have reasonable expectations as far as the intraday moves and all of that. When we came up here and down here, that was reasonable because, well, we had a long way to go until we found some support. And then you can see over the last 2 days, we kind of went down, bounced, went down, bounced. And that's because we keep kind of probing this area down here on the SPX, which again seems pretty reasonable just because we've got our 30 ATRs right there. You can see just price is sitting right there, and there's just a big level. Let me kind of zoom in here on the SPX, and you can see in through here. There's a level there. There's a lot of activity there. There's a lot of activity right there, and again, 1, 2, 3, and so I do think we need to be careful, or maybe on the side that this is likely to break lower at some point, but of course, it can bounce first or it can bear flag first. I think that's where we need to kind of understand not to be either super duper on the short side with 5-day options or something, because this whole market just hasn't really been going. And so trying to time this on a very, very short-term basis has been challenging. And I do think that this is going to break at some point, but obviously not today, not Friday. And so we might need to get a little bit of a bounce or just a little bit of a bear flag before we kind of roll over. It's kind of my thought on this one. Oh, did Danielle short Google? Nice. So I guess I wasn't the only one. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Let's see. We got 40. What do we got? 45%, and then we got 105% on our Google trade. Now, part of the reason why I decided, let me see where I can get this. Part of the reason why I decided to get out of it today was it did kind of open with a little bit of a gap down and a thrust lower. And we could look at things like FNGU or MAGs. They were getting a little extended to the downside. The SPX is still range bound. The NASDAQ was kind of also coming into a lower level. But really, Emil, my target was the weekly 21. And I just kind of, you can see here, we put an X. I thought maybe it would be about 290 because at the time the weekly 21 was still further back. And you can see here on the left-hand side, there's kind of a price congestion area. And you can see the line that I drew, which was about 290. So figured it's a reasonable target. I think we got to ultimately 296. So, okay, pretty close, pretty close. And then now that the weekly 21 has had enough time to actually populate, you can see that price did actually perfectly hit the weekly 21. Of course, it can go lower, but for what we're doing and kind of the moves that I had, that's a pretty nice straight down move to the weekly 21. So, maybe a couple dollars off, but that pretty much hit the target that I was looking for. And then the other interesting thing is if you look at this diagonal trend line, and you can see that even this morning, it perfectly hit the diagonal trend line. So isn't that interesting? Yeah. And then for those of you in the Moxie room, you guys know how much I like the 30 ATRs, but look what it did. It also hit the 30 ATR today. So there were a lot of things here, a lot of confluences that showed up. And I just said, I'm going to take it. This looks like a good place to at least exit. Of course, maybe there could be more, but I like what I'm seeing here. Let's go for it. The other thing, Emil, you look at this on the daily chart, what's happening with price pulling away from the daily 8 EMA. We're getting a pretty extended, pretty stretched. And so, as I said, from ever since the bounce after earnings, this thing's pretty much gone straight down. And the markets, we know this, markets, tickers, stocks, they don't like to go straight down. There's always a bounce somewhere. There's always a flag someplace. And so the fact that this pretty much went straight down told me like we just need to cash in our good trade and say thank you and kind of walk away from that one. Don't want to overstay our welcome like I did on Tesla last year coming into the end of the year. So yeah, good move on that one. This could bounce. And the question is it going to be a playable bounce or is it going to be a messy bounce? And I think that's really the unknown. It's kind of like when we're looking at MSTR, Bitcoin, that kind of stuff. I've been looking at this and talking about this, and especially those of you out there on the social medias, I know that a lot of people have been talking about this. And for as much as crypto has really broken, especially the couple weeks ago where it broke that level and really rolled off, I'd be very careful about getting aggressively short if anybody out there is looking to do that. Mostly because when you get a big move like this, it's kind of hard to get short right away after something like that, especially because since that was such an oversold short that bounced. And then in one view, I look at things like this, and a lot of times that looks like a capitulation low and that we should start actually moving back up. My concern, though, is even though that might be low, and maybe this doesn't go that much lower, I'm not sure if this is really ready to go much higher. And so this really could just be kind of a neutral situation. It could be just not really ready to go up and maybe not really going to go down. And so just because we see things are extremely oversold does not necessarily mean we need to jump in with both feet and buy it right up. Okay. Of course, that could happen, but I think we still need to have some caution in this market, even though I see that these are extremely oversold. And I do think that they could be at buy points, but I don't need to be the first one in. Even when we were trading MSTR back here, I was not the first one in, and I waited until I actually had my setup. So it's a little bit mixed. We're potentially there, but I'm just not sure if I'm super eager on some of these things. And even if we look at something like BMNR, again, I think these things are oversold. And it's the same reason, it's the same basic reason as to why I exited my Google short. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to get long Google. Okay. And you can even see kind of what's happening here. For now, BMNR, MSTR, they're really just kind of sideways. Yes, they could go higher. Maybe that's going to happen. But as I said, I'm not super interested in getting into this because I'm concerned that what if they really just go sideways? And what if maybe the sideways even resolves lower? And that's kind of the concern. Gosh, let me even look at silver. This kind of makes me think about silver is that I had a lot of people out there looking at silver and stuff like that, and they're trying to find a level here, and maybe they thought it was going to go up like this, and look, it's back down again. And so that's why MSTR, Bitcoin, Ethereum at this point, I'm sure they'll be great someday. Once the market gets itself fixed and back on track again, everything like that, I'm sure they'll come roaring back at some point. But time is important, and that's where something like silver, when it gets smashed like this, yeah, it can bounce a little bit, but for the most part, it's just kind of really not doing anything. In fact, it still looks like it has a little bit of a slant to the downside, and so you don't have to trade these things. We don't have to. If it's not clear, you don't have to be in these things. And the other reason why I'm still a little bit cautious with this market is because now the mega cap leaders, the mags, have been getting hit and starting to come down. And in what environment is Bitcoin and Ethereum going to go up when the mags are coming down? I already tried that a few weeks ago when it looked like things were basing and the market still seemed like maybe it was okay and looked like it was flagging and maybe the flagging was going to resolve to the upside. But now things are looking like they're getting kind of a little bit rougher out there. And the reason I'm saying that is because things like Apple for a while was kind of considered the safety trade. And then on Thursday, I think it was Thursday, it just got smashed. And I'm not entirely sure what the reason is or the news that came out about it. But you just look at the stock. And while from a technical standpoint, I was prepared for this. I actually was talking to the Moxie traders and said, hey, I think there's a pullback that should be happening here. I didn't expect it to be this big or that quick, but I figured that there was going to be a pullback. And the fact that they just dropped it that hard and that fast tells me like, kind of need to be careful in this environment right now. So we got Apple, we got Google that's come down. Netflix is kind of doing its own thing because of the whole Warner Brothers acquisition. So I can't really count that. Tesla, it's been kind of weak and coming down. Maybe it can hold this level, that seems to be kind of a prior level. But again, there's just really not much to work with right here, especially on the long side. So either be neutral, be out, or kind of find the correct side for some of these intraday moves. But there's nothing super exciting happening on Tesla either. And then let's see, we got Amazon. Amazon got smashed for earnings. Now, again, at some point, these might become so oversold that they could be either tradable to the upside or they just kind of stop going down and maybe kind of recover a little bit. Let me show you if we just go back here a little bit. Now, I know this is also granted the tariff tantrum situation right back here, but it's a decent example to where even when you get, say, Amazon really oversold, and yeah, sure, it bounces. It can still go lower after that bounce. And I think that's kind of where we're at right here is yes, that Amazon is extremely oversold and seems like it would be reasonable to bounce. But is the bounce playable? Is the bounce going to give us enough movement to actually be worth the risk? Is the or is this thing going to be choppy and it's just going to be a complete mess to try and trade it? That's kind of the unknown, and that's why I think a lot of times until we have kind of a clearer picture of what's going on with the market out there, we don't always need to jump into all these things just because we see something oversold and see a potential opportunity. I've been even looking at IGV. And I mean, this is kind of a good example. Got that bounce. There's a pretty good bounce. And look, right back down to previous lows. And this, just because this is oversold, does not necessarily need to jump right up. I thought it might, which I tried taking a trade on CRM last week. That was kind of testing the market. And I was like, nope, 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 just no energy in here. And so now this has gone from being extremely oversold to bouncing to possibly bear flagging, and it could just kind of stay down here and could continue to dribble down. We don't know. If it could jump up too, but I think we need to be a little bit on the cautious side because this market just doesn't feel like it's super happy and healthy, and things like this. That oversold does not necessarily mean that you can get a big bounce. It could just mean it's going to slow its descent. I think even I've used Reddit as an example in the past. Let's come over here and kind of come back way back over here. This was, I think that, I guess this was also the tariff tantrums, and same kind of deal. You can go from being extremely oversold to bouncing a little bit, but essentially it's a bear flag. And same thing here, bounce a little bit, but then fail, bounce a little bit, then fail, bounce a little bit, then fail. And it's only once the market finally changes gears and once the energy and the sentiment changes that these things actually start to go back up. So this is kind of why in this area, be careful with the oversold conditions. You don't want to keep shorting into the hole, but also I think you need to be careful on the long side because, well, the market's just not fixed yet. I don't think the things have really resolved yet. One way to look at this, for those of you guys out there on the social medias, the VIX is another gauge that I think we should be looking at. And while it is definitely elevated and it's been moving up and we've been trading this, I don't think that this thing has indicated that it's done yet. Okay, I think this is kind of like one of those things where it's not over until the big lady sings at the opera kind of thing. And I'm kind of feeling like this blow off top, but that's how the VIX works. I don't think this thing is just going to go away with a whimper, and I don't think the market's going to suddenly kind of be fixed. So I'm waiting for this thing to really surge and spike at some point. Now, of course, timing that is important, and that's where we go again back to the SPX, and we have to understand our levels. And it's unlikely that it's going to be today. Maybe it could be later this week. Sure, maybe this market just needs a little bit of a bounce or a bear flag, and then it would be ready to roll over and really get going. But yeah, we need to kind of let this thing breathe a little bit. This thing, the market's been so sideways for 3, 4 months that we need to be careful about trying to figure out exactly when that day is going to happen. And of course, that's where it comes down to having some skill in the market to kind of time some of this. Okay, so let's see. I think that mostly takes care of kind of running with this market. I guess I'll mention one more thing before I sign off with social media. Those of you out there on Facebook, X, and LinkedIn, whatever, especially YouTube, you guys should come over and check out my YouTube channel. It's actually Profit Pilot, which is the YouTube channel. And then you guys can see the shorts that I put out. I put out videos twice a week, and especially my market update videos. I actually went back and rewatched my video from last week, mid last week, and I had talked about GDX at that time too. And with the whole precious metals situation, again, I feel like people are still thinking that this could be bullish, and yeah, it could be. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that it's not in an environment where this is still ready to go up. I think gold and silver both had kind of exuberant runs, kind of had blow off tops. They can recover from those eventually. But I think right now, that was such a big move to the upside and kind of a blow off situation that I kind of think that they're still overbought. And while they're still in uptrends technically, I think that they could still use some pretty good pullbacks. And I think that there's an opportunity on the downside to do that. Jay, it is Profit Pilot. I think it's actually Profit Dash Pilot is the YouTube channel. I feel like you guys should be able to find that fairly easily, considering that you're on the social media right now. You should be able to find the links that are in the caption or something like that. Heck, probably even Moxie Trader would be maybe link you to it. But Profit Pilot is the YouTube channel. And so the thing that I've been looking at and talking about with say GDX and GLD is just how high these things are. I mean, these have been incredible runs. And I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in the fact that these have been running that we keep thinking that they're just going to keep going. And especially gold being kind of a flight to safety. Oh, well, if the market's coming down, gold's going to keep going up. Well, maybe not. I think we need to be aware that this thing got pretty overbought up here and that gold or GDX has a history of at least pulling back to the weekly 21. You can just look back and see how often this thing has gotten pretty close to the weekly 21. And the difference this time, I think, is that we had this pretty big run over the last few weeks that really just ran it along the weekly 8. And now that we've kind of broken, because I believe of this blow off top situation, I think it could be reasonable to expect that we pull back to the weekly 21 and then we kind of see where we go from there. And there could be a lot of money to be made, even on a move like that. We don't need these huge moves. We just need to be precise or reasonable with our expectations and see if we can actually get it. And so that's why I'm saying, hey, gold, GDX, they're still technically in uptrends. We don't know if they're going to be broken yet, but I think a reasonable pullback is out there. Oh, Jay, I might have to link it. Let's see. at least on my interaction here, because I'm on Restream. I'm not entirely sure how to do that, but maybe I could put it in the captions. The other thing that I could potentially do, let me try this. I'll show it to you real quick. So you can just give me 2 seconds here. Ooh. Okay, well, I guess this will do. So right there, Simpler Trading's Profit Pilot. You should be able to just search Profit Pilot, but I wonder if actually Simpler Trading's Profit Pilot. But there it is. Yeah, at Profit Pilot. So hopefully you guys can find that if you're interested in checking it out. Okay. So Andre, yeah, cool, nice. Yeah, glad you're following it too. Helps kind of fill in some of the gaps if you can't come in live with my sessions or whatever. You can kind of check my condensed versions of these videos. Okay, so let me wrap up with the social media session, people. Let me get that stream ended, and then I'll hop back over to the Moxie room. We'll kind of go back to a few things here. All right, guys. So social media is good seeing you. Hop on over to Profit Pilot for YouTube. That way you can get more connected and see what I put out there.